This case is of India's first famous perfume expert, Monica Gur. The reason for Monica's murder and the method used by the killer shook the entire India. The date was actually October 6, 2016. Monica Gur resided in the village named Sangolda in the famous state of Goa in India. Goa is known for its famous beaches, culture, climate, and historical places. Besides, here you can also get a chance to witness colorful architecture, greenery, and beautiful sunsets daily. Actually, Monica lived in a 3-bedroom rented apartment in a society named Sapna Raj Valley in Sangolda village. As usual, at around 9 to 10 in the morning, Monica's maid arrives at her house and rings the doorbell of Monica's apartment. However, there is no response from inside. Then the maid rings the bell again, but still no response. Then she tries calling out several times and rings the bell 3 or 4 more times. Additionally, she knocks on the door, but still there is no sound from inside and no one opens the door. This situation feels very strange to the maid because Monica has never done this before. Feeling a little anxious now, she calls Monica's brother, Monica Gur, who lives in Mumbai, and explains the entire situation to him. After this, Monica's brother Anand calls Monica's phone, but there is no response from the other end. He keeps trying to connect with his sister through calls, but Monica doesn't pick up the phone. After that, Anand calls Monica's neighbor, who lived in the adjacent apartment, and Monica had also left a duplicate key to her. Shortly after Anand's call, the woman arrives outside Monica's house with the duplicate key. She then opens the door with the same duplicate key, and as soon as Monica's neighbor and her maid enter the house, both scream because Monica was lying straight on the bed. Her hands were tied behind the bed, and there was no clothing on the lower part of her body. Additionally, Monica was not moving at all. Seeing all this, Monica's neighbor immediately calls the police. Soon after, the Goa police arrive at Monica's apartment with some lady police officers, an ambulance, and doctors. However, when some doctors cover Monica's body and check her pulse, it is found that Monica has passed away. Afterwards, the dead body is sent for postmortem, and then the room is searched. The police searched the room, but the surprising thing was that there was no evidence of forced entry anywhere in the entire apartment. There were eggshells in the room, suggesting they had been eaten recently. Then Monica's purse was checked, but apart from some debit card bills, the police found no evidence in it. Now, to find evidence, the police consider examining all the CCTV footage in the society. But then they find out that there are no CCTV cameras installed in that society. Besides this, the police also question the people living in Sapna Raj Valley. However, nobody has seen any suspicious person entering or leaving Monica's house in the past day. Nevertheless, the police also investigate from the angle of theft. But nothing was missing from Monica's flat that could indicate that this murder was committed for theft. Looking at all these things, the police believe that whoever murdered Monica had some information about her because no one forcefully entered the flat and nothing was stolen from the house. However, Monica was married, but due to some disputes, she had been living alone for a year. Therefore, the police's suspicion first falls on Monica's husband, Bharath Ramanrutham. After that, the police interrogate him about this murder, but nothing comes to light during the interrogation that would make them suspect him. In fact, Monica was the daughter of a former judge in Mumbai, Ramesh Kuder, and she was initially a photographer, but later she started researching on perfumes. After this, in a short span of time, she became a successful perfume expert. Due to her profession, Monica was quite famous not only in her society, but also throughout the city, often seen hobnobbing with big businessmen. Therefore, as soon as news of Monica's murder surfaced, the entire state of Goa was in shock. At that time, this was the news running on every news channel in the country, and the public wanted to know who the mystery killer was. Meanwhile, Monica's postmortem report also arrives, revealing that Monica died due to suffocation, and it also becomes clear that she was raped. Anyway, the police had investigated the case from every angle so far, but they had neither found any suspects nor any clues. But then, during the investigation that evening, a police officer suddenly remembers that they had found some debit card bills from Monica's purse. but they hadn't found any debit card during the entire search. Afterwards, the Goa police approached the bank regarding the bills of that debit card and request to check the transaction details of that card. It is found out that on the morning of October 6th at 6 o'clock, this card was used at an ATM in Porvorim area. Porvorim is merely 4 to 5 kilometers away from Sapnaraj Valley. Following this, the police instruct the bank to keep an eye on this card and also scrutinize the CCTV footage of the ATM in Porvorim. The face of the boy who withdrew money from that card was captured on the ATM camera. Subsequently, with the CCTV footage in hand, the Goa police reach Sapnaraj Valley. As soon as the locals see this footage, they recognize the boy shown in the footage immediately and identify him as Rajkumar, who used to be the old security guard here. However, he was fired from his job 2 months ago on charges of theft. For the Goa police, this was a major success because for the first time in this case, the police had a name and a face of suspect. Now, when the police check Rajkumar's background, they find out that Rajkumar, 21, is from Bathinda city in Punjab state, and there have been several theft cases registered against him before. The police had all the information about Rajkumar, but the challenge now was how to catch him. So, to catch Rajkumar, the Goa police started waiting for the next transaction from Monica's debit card. Some time passes and suddenly the police find out that recently some money has been withdrawn from an ATM in Bangalore city using this card. Let us tell you that Bangalore city is about 370 miles away from Sangolda village. Upon seeing this, the Goa police immediately spring into action and contact the Bangalore City Police. After that, Bangalore police checked the CCTV footage of that ATM, and Rajkumar's face was clearly visible in the footage of that ATM as well. Following this, Bangalore police took Rajkumar's photo and began questioning all hotels and lodges around that ATM. After a while, a man at the reception of one hotel recognizes Rajkumar's photo and says, "Yes, a man with this face is staying in our hotel, but he has gone out for some work right now." Afterwards, some police officers dressed in civilian clothes stand outside the same hotel, waiting for Rajkumar to arrive. But as soon as Rajkumar returns to the hotel after a while, the police officers recognize him and apprehend him. Now, because the police officers were in civilian clothes, Rajkumar doesn't even recognize them. And just like that, on October 8th, 2016, 2 days after Monica's murder, Rajkumar is arrested from a hotel in Bangalore. Then Goa police are contacted. Afterwards, the Goa police arrive in Bangalore and take Rajkumar to Goa with transit remand from the court. Now, the interrogation begins, and due to the firm questioning by the police, Rajkumar admits to killing Monica. When the police ask him why he did it, he narrates his entire story to the police, and the story goes something like this. Actually, in the month of June, 39-year-old Monica decides to shift to Goa for her perfume business, for which Monica starts looking for a rented flat, and on June 7th, 2016, she reaches Sapnaraj Valley to see a flat. At the society's gate, Monica meets security guard Rajkumar, and the society's management had already called Rajkumar beforehand, informing him that a woman would come to see a flat, so show her the flat. Afterwards, Rajkumar shows Monica the flat, and after seeing it, Monica leaves from there. But what happens here is that during showing the flat, Rajkumar falls in love with Monica unilaterally. Now, day and night, he kept thinking only about Monica. About 4 to 5 days pass like this, and then one day Rajkumar becomes very happy because that day Monica had come to shift to Sapnaraj Valley with her belongings. After that, Monica tells Rajkumar that the flat he showed her, he has taken that flat. Now, because Rajkumar was very happy, he himself, with the help of 2 people, delivers Monica's belongings to her apartment. Rajkumar does this because he wanted to see Monica repeatedly, but because he was a security guard, he didn't get many chances to see and meet Monica. But then one day an idea comes to his mind, and he goes to his manager and says that he wants to do the cleaning and maintenance work of the society's cars along with his duty, because he is in desperate need of money. After hearing Rajkumar's need, the manager also agrees to his proposal because he thinks that this way Rajkumar will earn some extra money and the needs of the people living in the society will also be fulfilled. However, Rajkumar had something else in his mind, and after this, he goes straight to Monica's apartment. After that, he tells Monica that now he can also clean her car, but it will cost her some extra money. Monica also agrees to this because she didn't have enough time to do household chores while handling her business. Now Rajkumar started cleaning Monica's car and would use the pretext of exchanging keys to also visit Monica's apartment, where he would see Monica 3 or 4 times a day. But it was due to the cleaning of this very car that one day Rajkumar loses his job. It so happened that one day Monica's umbrella went missing from his car. Monica asks Rajkumar about it, but he says he didn't see any umbrella in the car. After this, Monica complains to the society management and says that today, not only my umbrella, but many other persons' things have gone missing just like before. If such incidents continue to happen in the society, it will tarnish its reputation. Now, after hearing Monica's complaint, the society management takes this matter seriously and begins an investigation. It is then found out that only Rajkumar used to open Monica's car for cleaning, besides Monica herself. After that, a search is conducted in the guard room where Rajkumar used to stay, and Monica's umbrella is also recovered from there. Now, since thefts were already a concern in society, after Monica's umbrella is found, suspicion falls entirely on Rajkumar. As a result, on July 22, 2016, Rajkumar is dismissed from his job on theft charges. From here, the story takes a new turn. While Rajkumar had deeply loved Monica before, now he starts to harbor a significant amount of hatred towards her. However, after being dismissed from his job, Rajkumar leaves and starts working as a laborer in the Ponda area of Goa. But even there, he only works for a few days. During this time, he meets Monica twice and asks her to withdraw the theft complaint, but Monica flatly refuses. Now, hearing this, Rajkumar gets even angrier, but he couldn't do anything at that moment. After that, Rajkumar arrives in Chennai in search of a job, then goes to Mumbai from there, and finally spends some time working in Pune city. Everywhere, Rajkumar earns his living by doing odd jobs, but when he doesn't find any decent job anywhere, he returns to Goa on the 2nd of October 2016. But this time, he had something planned in Goa. There was still a lot of hatred against Monica in his mind. The very next day, that is, on the 3rd of October in the afternoon, Rajkumar reaches Sapnaraj Valley again. He enters the society through the main gate, and by chance, no one sees him entering. Then he goes straight to Monica's apartment below, but he notices that Monica's car is not parked there. Seeing this, he understands that Monica is not at home at the moment. However, instead of leaving from there, Rajkumar decides to wait for Monica to arrive in the society. Now, because Rajkumar knows every route in the society, he decides to hide on the terrace of the society because, generally, no one comes to the terrace. Meanwhile, Rajkumar keeps looking down repeatedly and checks Monica's car, but even after the whole October 3rd passes, Monica's car is not seen. Then the next day, October 4th comes, but Monica's car still doesn't show up, and then October 4th also passes. On October 5th, Monica's car was checked several times by Rajkumar since morning, but it wasn't seen. Now, it had been almost 2 days since he stayed on the terrace. There was neither food to eat nor anything to drink on the terrace during this time. Many times, Rajkumar felt like leaving from there. But the fire of revenge didn't let him go, and fueled by this vengeance, Rajkumar spent more than 48 hours hungry and thirsty on the terrace. Around 3 to 3:30 p.m. on October 5th, 2016, Rajkumar came down once again, and this time he saw Monica's car parked. This meant that Monica had returned home. Seeing this, there was a strange smile on Rajkumar's face, but then he went back to the terrace and started waiting for darkness. After that, he comes downstairs around 6:30 in the evening and rings Monica's flat doorbell. When Monica asks who, Rajkumar identifies himself as a security supervisor. Hearing this, Monica opens the door, but as soon as she does, Rajkumar forcefully pushes her and then shuts the door from inside. Before Monica can comprehend anything, Rajkumar takes out a knife from his pocket and warns her, "If you make noise, I'll stab you." Still, Monica screams loudly to protect herself, but Rajkumar covers her mouth with his hand. Then Rajkumar takes Monica to the bathroom, intimidating and controlling her. After that, he forcefully takes Monica to the bedroom at knife point, lays her on the bed, ties both her hands behind the bed first, then ties both her legs as well. Now, Rajkumar demands money from Monica at knife point. Upon seeing herself trapped, Monica also gets very nervous, so she tells the Rajkumar, "Take all the money in the purse." After that, the Rajkumar empties Monica's entire purse. About 4,000 Indian rupees come out of the purse, like $48. But the Rajkumar's desire is not satisfied with that, and he asks Monica for more money. So Monica says, "I only have this much money right now. If you need more money, I have a debit card. Take it and withdraw money from the ATM." The Rajkumar didn't know how to use a debit card. Still, he learns from Monica how to use it. So, systematically, Monica tells him the way to withdraw money, how to insert the card into the ATM machine, then select the language, and then how to enter the secret PIN. And along with that, she also tells him her debit card's PIN number. I think, maybe in that situation, Monica feels that now Rajkumar will leave her and go from here. Then she will complain to the police and Rajkumar will be caught through the location of the debit card. But Rajkumar takes the money and card and puts a cloth in Monica's mouth. After doing all this, he now knew that Monica could not do anything, so he leaves from there with great confidence and then goes to the kitchen. He takes out water from the fridge, boils the eggs, eats them with great ease, and there was no hurry for him. He was eating and drinking with great comfort because he knew that Monica lived alone in that flat. Now, he also takes out ice cream from the fridge and eats it. Besides, he also eats chocolate, meaning that all the hunger and thirst he had been suffering for 2 days on the terrace is satisfied now. It was around 12 o'clock at night by all this. When his stomach is full again, he returns to Monica. He takes her phone, although it was locked, but Rajkumar's unlock it by forcing Monica. Then Rajkumar opens an adult site on her phone and forcibly shows her 3 adult videos. Feeling all this, Monica becomes even more anxious because she realized that Rajkumar was not going to let her go now. Then Rajkumar unties the rope from Monica's legs and removes all the clothes from her waist down. Then he fulfills his desire that had been in his mind since the first day he saw Monica. It was nearly 2 a.m. in the morning by now, and Rajkumar had been in Monica's apartment for almost 8 hours when Rajkumar's desire was filled. He gets nervous for the first time when the question arises in his mind whether Monica knows him well, and if he leaves Monica alive, she will tell the police about it, and then the Rajkumar will be punished. So the prince lifted a pillow from the same bed and began to suffocate Monica's mouth and kept pressing until she died. Then the Rajkumar got up from there comfortably and went to the bathroom again. After that, Rajkumar shaved his beard, then he bathed, and at 3:30 a.m. on October 6, 2016, in the darkness, he sneaked out of the Sapna Valley stealthily. Then at 6 a.m., after withdrawing money from the ATM, he went to Bangalore, where the police arrested him. After hearing the entire story, all the police officers were quite surprised. After that, the Goa police gathers all the evidence against Rajkumar. Then, on January 6, 2017, a 228-page charge sheet is present in court, charging murder, rape, and robbery. However, the trial of this case is still ongoing. Let's see when the criminal will be punished. If there is any update in this case, we will update you through the channel's community post. So friends, this was the complete story of the Monica Gur murder case.
The case of Sheila Labar, a monster with an angelic appearance. Psychological and physical traumas received at an early age can have a very unpredictable effect on adult life. Of course, far from always, they lead to the fact that a person becomes cruel and seeks to hurt others. But sometimes it is the trauma can give rise to a real monster. Criminal psychologist Adrian Rain believes that there are genetic and psychophysical mechanisms that can turn a person into a cold-blooded killer, about which he wrote in detail in his book, Anatomy of Violence. History knows a lot of serial criminals who had a truly hellish childhood, and perhaps to them can be attributed our heroine today, Sheila Labar. This woman had an angelic appearance which she skillfully used, seducing her victims and then brutally murdered them. Despite the fact that the court was able to prove only 2 of her crimes, criminologists are sure that there were many more. And now let's look at this difficult story from the beginning and try to understand whether Sheila Labar was a born monster or became him as a result of the cruelty that she faced in childhood. Who is Sheila Labar? Sheila Labar was born in 1958, the 4th of July, in the small country town of Fort Payne, Alabama. She was the youngest of 3 children of her parents and was raised with her brother and sister Lynn. Her childhood was spent in a picturesque but rather secluded place, on a farm nestled among cornfields. According to the memories of Lynn's older sibling, Sheila was an active, inquisitive, and open-minded girl with a creative streak. She liked to be in the center of attention, had a good voice and cute appearance, so perhaps, if her life had turned out differently, she would have become a famous actress or singer. But instead of bright posters, her name decorated the pages of criminal chronicles. The unimaginable cruelty of her father. The head of the family, Manuel Bailey, for many years suffered from alcohol addiction, although it would be more accurate to say that his addiction suffered from his entire family. He often went on binges, turning into a real beast who enjoyed abusing his wife and children. He insulted and humiliated them, beat them with anything that came to hand, could throw everyone out in the middle of the night in a downpour or frost, and locked himself in the house, not letting anyone inside. Mothers, daughters, and sons often had to spend the night in a barn or in the open air in the field. One day, when Manuel was once again in a drunken rage, he began throwing dishes and other objects at his family members. The mother tried to cover the children as best she could, but one of the flower pots thrown by her husband hit her youngest daughter Sheila in the head. Sheila suffered a serious concussion and a lifelong scar on her temple, which she painstakingly covered with her hair. But not even the insults and beatings were the worst thing that the sisters had to endure in their parents' home. According to the memories of Sheila and Lynn, Manuel from an early age forcibly inclined them to intimacy. The mother may have been aware of what was going on, but the subject was never broached. However, despite the nightmare at home, Sheila did well enough in school. She dreamed of leaving the farm as soon as possible and go to conquer the big city. The girl was quite ambitious and determined. She passionately wanted to realize her childhood dream in life and become an actress or pop singer. And she had everything for this: charisma, bright appearance, and a beautiful voice. Adulthood, first marriage. Barely Sheila was 18 years old. She left her parents' home, but adult life was not so joyful. To enter the university, she was not allowed to average score, and to move to the big city, she simply did not have the money. Then Sheila got a job as a maid in one of the hotels, where by that time her older sister was already working. It should be noted that Sheila had a slender figure and a very attractive appearance. She had big blue eyes, a charming smile, and a mop of thick long hair. She was surrounded by attention from men, and over time, she learned to use it and manipulate her suitors. In the late 70s, Labar, then Bailey, met a guy named Jonathan Baxter, and a romantic relationship began between them. Jonathan was not yet 20 years old at the time, but he already had a young daughter from a previous relationship. However, the child did not become a hindrance, and soon the couple got married. However, this marriage lasted only a few months and collapsed after Jonathan learned that the young wife abused his daughter while he disappeared at work. Sheila was frankly annoyed with the child, and she would raise her hand or lock her in a closet if she started crying or acting up. Jonathan did not organize scandals and listen to explanations. He just Strasut filed for divorce and put his wife with his belongings outside his house. He never wanted to see or hear from her again. After the divorce, Sheila dated various men and mostly lived off them. But all these relationships were fleeting and lasted from a few weeks to a couple of months, until in the early 80s she met her future second husband, Ronnie Jennings. The tumultuous romance soon led to marriage, and Sheila took on a double last name, Bailey Jennings. It was an unhealthy relationship between two irascible and unstable people who regularly cheated on each other, scandalized, and even fought. Still, their marriage lasted more than 3 years. In 1984, after another family quarrel, Sheila demanded a divorce from her husband, but he refused her. In fact, Ronnie did not hold on to the relationship at all. He just wanted to piss off his wife and make her mad, and he succeeded. Sheila became hysterical, took a large number of drugs in front of her husband, drinking strong alcohol, and after this infernal cocktail, sat behind the wheel of the car and rushed down the road. Naturally, soon Sheila, under the influence of pills and alcohol, lost consciousness, flew off the road, and at high speed crashed into a tree. She miraculously survived, but suffered a massive head injury. She spent more than a week in a deep coma, and doctors made no prognosis. When Sheila finally regained consciousness and gradually recovered, she was transferred to a psychiatric hospital where she spent several months. She later complained to her sister that one of the orderlies was constantly harassing her and possibly taking advantage of her helpless state when she was heavily sedated. After all this, Sheila returned to her second husband's home, but began to behave not just aggressively, but threateningly toward him. When during another scandal she attacked Ronnie and poked him in the chest with nail scissors, Ronnie, fearing for his own life and health, filed for divorce and hurriedly moved out of the mad woman. Rich lover. When the second marriage was dissolved, the young woman began looking for lovers through the dating columns of the print media, and she left her ads there as well. But no man did not stay with her for long, because Sheila tended to dominate everything, rigidly suppressing their partners, both in intimate and everyday life. Soon the photo of an attractive girl in the dating section drew the attention of 60-year-old Wilfred Bill Labar. The man had previously been married twice and had adult children and grandchildren from previous marriages. He was widowed a few years ago and had been living alone on his large country ranch ever since. Bill was a fairly wealthy man. He had a chiropractic office in Epping, New Hampshire, and on the ranch he raised horses. At the same time, he was very lonely and needed a strong, powerful woman. In fact, that's exactly what he found. Sheila was attracted by the wealth of her new acquaintance, and she decided that it would be an ideal union for her. And to make Bill completely lost his head, she began to send him a postal mail frank letters, supplementing them with her nude photos. The trap worked, and soon Labar invited a charming pen pal to visit his ranch. Their romance developed rapidly. An elderly man is not stingy on expensive gifts for a young mistress, and in the summer of 1987, she moved to live with him. This has incredibly flattered the doctor, who now went out in public with a beautiful companion who was half his age and was fit for him as a daughter. Nevertheless, he did not plan to marry Sheila. However, Sheila, not waiting for a marriage proposal, changed her name, calling herself Labar. Bill was surprised by this turn of events, but he did not object. Sheila began to interfere in all the affairs of her elderly lover, starting to control his business, finances, and disposition of his property. In addition, Bill was getting older and could not satisfy the intimate needs of a young woman. Then, according to Sheila herself, he allowed her to meet other men, whom she often brought directly to their home. One of Sheila's regular lovers, closer to the mid-90s, was a Jamaican national named Wayne Ennis. He was much younger than Sheila and was initially hired as an au pair on the ranch, but soon the young man, with Bill's consent, which was probably given under pressure from Sheila, moved to live in the owner's house. In 1995, Sheila and Wayne officially legalized their relationship, and the spouse considered that from now on, he would be her only man. But soon he realized that he was wrong, because his wife continued to meet with different men. Wayne was not satisfied with this, and one day he jumped with fists on Sheila and her next lover, causing them bodily harm. Accustomed to being dominated, Sheila, for the first time, didn't know how to deal with her third husband, who got into a fight every time a rival appeared on the horizon. Eventually, she filed for divorce and sought a court injunction to stop Wayne from approaching her, accusing him of violence and assault. Another divorce did not affect the turbulent personal life of Sheila, who continued to meet with numerous lovers, changing them like gloves. True, Now her relationship increasingly often began to end with lawsuits from men who accused Sheila not just in cruelty, but also in the threat to their lives and health. Thus, one of her boyfriends she deliberately hit by a car and almost ran over. Another almost broke his head, and another scratched his face so that he was forever scarred. Sheila, with age, became more and more dangerous to others. From every man she demanded obedience, and in cases of disobedience, fell into a rage. In 2000, at the age of 74, Bill Labar died of heart failure. Although doctors and police officers did not see a criminal trail in the death of an elderly man, his family members were convinced that Sheila had something to do with it. In their opinion, she had been poisoning Bill little by little for years, and literally drove him into the light. Despite the fact that Bill and Sheila were never officially married, Sheila, according to the will, became the sole heiress of all his property. The relatives tried to challenge this through the courts, but never got anywhere. They are still convinced that the mistress forced Bill to write the will she wanted. House of Temptation. After Bill's death, as I have already mentioned, all his property came under Sheila's complete control. Now she no longer had to consider anyone's opinion. She could do whatever she wanted with the estate she had inherited. She herself called her home a place of seduction and pleasure, where there were no inhibitions. She met men on the streets, in bars, on the internet, lured them to her, and then tried to keep them on the ranch as long as possible. She didn't care about their age, skin color, or any physical appearance. She promised them unearthly pleasure, and then sought to suppress and subjugate them to her will. Sheila regularly tried to seduce couriers by meeting them in the nude and offering an alternative method of payment. But she didn't take into account the fact that she herself was not getting any younger and was nowhere near as attractive as she used to be. They got to the point where couriers simply refused to come to her address. Neighbors noticed that on the ranch Labar constantly come different men, but some hurried to leave the place the same day. Others were delayed, but also for a short time. What was going on in the house itself could only be guessed at. Where had Michael DeLorge disappeared to? Soon, Sheila decided to look for lovers among men who were in dire need of housing, money, or those men who suffered from addiction. This category was the most vulnerable and proved to be an easy prey for the cunning woman, who everywhere posed as a widowed millionaire and talked about her untold wealth, inherited by her. In 2004, Labar met on one of the city streets homeless man named Michael DeLodge. He was in a difficult life situation and lost literally everything because of addiction to illegal drugs. His relatives tried to send him to a rehabilitation clinic, but he ran away from there and has been loitering ever since. Sheila liked Michael, and she invited him to her, promising shelter, food, and the necessary drugs in exchange for intimacy. Moving to the ranch, the guy was completely dependent on his old mistress. He complied with all her demands, afraid to be on the street again. But Sheila quickly got into the taste, and her desires became more and more sophisticated. She bound, beat, and humiliated Michael, taking pleasure in it. He tried to escape several times, walking dozens of miles and hiding in homeless shelters, but he never decided to go to the police for fear they wouldn't believe him. Meanwhile, Sheila found him each time and brought him back to the ranch. In desperation, he tried to contact his family members and let them know he was in trouble. His loved ones immediately responded to this disturbing news, but it was too late. In October 2005, Michael DeLorge disappeared without a trace. When his family contacted Sheila directly, she stated that she and Michael had broken up. He had left her, and his current whereabouts were unknown to her. Michael did not show up at any of the places he had been to before. No one who knew him had seen him, and there was no way to contact him. Contacting the police was fruitless, and Labar remained beyond suspicion, trusting Kenny County. Sheila's tales of her exorbitant wealth were greatly exaggerated, and the house and automobile had to be maintained, so she was forced to get a job. Naturally, Sheila chose an occupation to her liking. She became an operator of intimate phone services. Since she had a truly enchanting voice, men fell for the bait and offered to meet her in person. Among such guys was Kenny County, who at the time of their acquaintance was barely 24 years old. The young man was attractive in appearance, very good-natured and open. However, He had a low IQ level, due to which he was very gullible. This was exactly the kind of guy Labar was looking for. Kenny was very close to his mother, on whom he actually depended, but Sheila, with the help of clever manipulations, managed to break this connection and literally lure Kenny to herself. She made him an unforgettable night of love and promised that they would be like this all the time. The young man decided that he had met the woman of his dreams, about which he informed his relatives, and then moved to live in Sheila's house. But soon Sheila showed the guy her true face, having arranged for him a real torture room in one of the rooms. Each time, intimacy inevitably turned into a brutal beating, or something worse. Kenny's body was covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, cuts, and burn marks. But he could not leave the house of the mistress who had completely subjugated his will. Sheila did not allow him to see and communicate with his loved ones, and his family could only guess what was happening to Kenny. The first alarm was raised by neighbors who periodically noticed the guy and were horrified by his sickly appearance. A few days before his disappearance, a local store clerk took a picture of the young man on her cell phone camera, and later, this picture was attached to the case file in court. In the photo, Kenny's condition could be described as deplorable. He was very thin, there were huge bruises under his eye and on his cheek, and his nose was probably broken. Judging by the degree of healing, all these injuries had been inflicted at different times, which suggested that the guy had been brutally beaten for a long time. The contents of his cart were also alarming. He rolled 2 large canisters of fuel to the cash register, as it later turned out, for his own cremation. The store employees were so puzzled and even frightened by the guy's appearance that they decided to report him to the police for possible domestic violence. But this time, Sheila managed to get away with it, and they could not charge her with anything. Soon, Kenny stopped contacting his family altogether, and when his worried mother arrived at Labar's house, the owner behaved aggressively and advised to leave Kenny alone. All subsequent attempts ended similarly, at which point Kenny County's family filed a missing persons report with the police, indicating that he may be being held forcibly at the country ranch, a home crematorium, and gruesome findings. When police arrived at Sheila's home, she claimed that the young man no longer lived with her, and claimed that Kenny had run away because his mother, whom he was allegedly terrified of, began visiting them frequently. As evidence, Sheila provided an audio recording in which she asks her lover if his own mother had attacked him, and he quietly gives an affirmative answer. It all seemed more than strange, and the very next day, an officer visiting Sheila secured a search warrant for the estate. Sheila had been on the police's radar many times before, and her name had been linked to another mysterious disappearance of a boyfriend. But over the years, Sheila had never been questioned, and her house and grounds had never been searched. When the police arrived, they did not find Labar at home, but they did see several fires burning near the outbuildings. The fires looked strange and were made of improvised materials, a mattress, fragments of wooden furniture, hay, etc., all doused with a flammable mixture. One of the bonfires had bones in it that clearly looked like human remains. The squad requested reinforcements in the form of forensic experts, reporting all the findings. But that turned out to be just the tip of the iceberg compared to what they discovered next. Almost all over the house were found poorly washed traces of blood. It was so much that it seemed as if there had been a real massacre. It turned out that the blood belonged to at least 3 different people. The bones smoldering in the fire belonged to the missing Kenny, and there were 2 empty fuel cans lying nearby, the same ones the boy had bought at the local store the day before. But that wasn't all. Also found on the property were the remains of Michael Delage, who had disappeared a few years earlier, and some fingers of some third guy who was never identified. Among other things, a large number of items belonging, judging by the size, to various men were fished out of the sump at the ranch, the fates of which have not been learned. The hostess herself was not at home at the time of the police visit. She had figured it out and gone on the run. Sheila hitchhiked to Boston, where she obviously hoped to get lost. Moreover, on the way, she seduced one of the drivers who gave her a ride, and he trustingly invited her to live in his house. However, the next day, having seen on TV news about the search for a dangerous criminal, the new lover himself called the police. and reported that Sheila is now in his bed. It was there that she was arrested. During the search of Sheila's home, another frightening find was made: a box of videotapes. On the tapes, Kenny, Michael, and several other men confessed to horrific crimes, but judging by the guy's appearance and condition, they made these confessions under torture. Since Labar's arrest, her mental health has raised a lot of questions, so the court ordered the necessary evaluations. Sheila was found to have a delusional disorder as well as signs of schizophrenia. She called herself an angel sent from heaven to protect children from rapists. It was Sheila's failing mental health that became the basis on which her attorney tried to build a defense. He called his client a profoundly sick person and tried to prove that she was not aware of her actions. The reason for this was the mental and physical trauma she had suffered as a child. The defendant herself claimed that many years ago, when she was in that terrible accident and found herself in a coma on the verge of death, she met with God, and the latter told her to cleanse the world of men who infringe on children. Sheila's ex-husbands and some of Sheila's lovers also spoke in court, who, in one voice, called her a crazy, unstable, and extremely violent woman. And Wayne Annis, the third husband, said that the ex-wife repeatedly persuaded him to kill Mr. Labar in order to seize his property. But despite the defense's attempts to convince the court that Sheila was insane and in need of treatment, it was proven that she was aware of her actions at the time of her crimes. She was found guilty in July 2008 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of ever being released. All of her appeals were rejected. Sheila is now serving her sentence in Florida at Homestead Correctional Facility. In 2012, at the Summer Olympics in London, the star of a young Puerto Rican boxer, Felix Verdejo Sanchez, shone brightly. He was called a diamond, one of the most promising and promising athletes of his country. He was predicted to win titles and gold medals. Then it seemed to everyone that this talented and motivated young man will reach fantastic heights in sports. In 2021, the name of the boxer again traveled all the world's media, but this time fell into the section of criminal chronicles. This story is about a teenage attachment that grew into a kind of addiction and led to a terrible tragedy, and also about how the author of the main knockout of 2014, who was praised and promoted by two-time Olympic champion Vasyl Lomachenko, almost received a death sentence, but eventually went to prison for life. It is noteworthy that despite the presence of irrefutable evidence and confessions of the boxer's accomplice, he himself, to this day, refuses to plead guilty. The future star of world boxing was born in the Puerto Rican city of San Juan in 1993 on May 19th. He grew up in a rather modest large family, and from an early age was fond of port. True, in childhood he planned to connect his life with baseball, but his further fate was determined by a funny incident. When the boy was 9 years old, a family friend came to visit them with his son of the same age. The boys were playing in the yard, but suddenly quarreled and a fight broke out. Parents separated the children, and the father of the future athlete noted that if he wants to fight with someone in the future, let him wear boxing gloves. After that fight, Felix, at his request, was taken to a local gym, where the boy, as he later admitted himself, from the first training session, fell in love with boxing. At the age of 16, he won the Pan American Junior Championships. A year later, he won his country's championship. And a year later, he went to the Olympic Games in London, where he reached the quarterfinals. In the same year began his brilliant career in the professional ring. In total, Verdejo had 29 fights, gaining 27 confident victories, and in 2014, he was recognized as the author of the best knockout in the fight against Sergio Villanueva. A year later, Felix won his first championship belt with the WBO Latino title, which he subsequently defended 6 more times in 2 years. Everyone who saw him in the fight had no doubt this young man will write his name in the history of world boxing. And now let's get to know Keishla Rodriguez. The girl was born in November 1993 in San Juan. The full name given to her at birth is Keishla Marlene Rodriguez Ortiz. Her parents, Jose and Kayla Rodriguez, had another common daughter, Baralisa Nicole, and also the couple raised Kayla's son Jonathan from a previous marriage of a woman. Kayla grew up an open and sociable girl. She did well in school and adored animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian in the future. Her best friend was her sister, Baralise, to whom she confided all her secrets and worries. Kayla studied in the same school with Felix Verdejo, who was her age. Young people were acquainted since childhood, and an adolescence between them began a romantic relationship. In 2011, Rodriguez's parents divorced and separated. Kayla moved to relatives in Florida, and her daughters, who were by then already adults, decided to stay in San Juan. Despite the fact that each of the sisters had long since lived their own lives, they continued to stay in close contact and told each other about everything that was happening to them. At the age of 18, a promising boxer who has already managed to take part in the Olympic Games had an affair with a young schoolgirl and aspiring model, Elisa Maria Santiago Sierra. At that time, the girl was only 14 years old and she was still in school. But even then, she made big plans for the future with a promising and world-famous athlete. In addition, Eliza's parents were not at all against this relationship. Attractive and talented Felix, who has always had a lot of fans, becoming a boxing star, literally bathed in the rays of fame and was surrounded by female attention. He did not miss the opportunity to spin a novel or a passing affair on the side, and also, despite the serious relationship with Eliza, continued to meet with his school friend, Kayla. Kayla's sister, Baralice, and her mother, Kayla Rodriguez, knew about the affair and did not approve of the relationship. In addition, the situation was very ambiguous. On the one hand, Eliza considered herself the only woman in great love of the athlete was preparing for the wedding and made far-reaching plans for their joint future. On the other hand, Kayla knew that the lover had a fiancé, but at the same time, Felix did not let her go. On top of that, he was her first great love, and deep down, the naive girl herself still hoped to be the one. In 2016, the boxer did marry the young Eliza, who at that time was barely 19 years old. Eliza by that time was already quite a famous model, had tens of thousands of followers in social networks, and also opened her own beauty studio for eyelash extensions. In August of just a few months after the wedding, the athlete got into a serious car accident when he was rushing on his motorcycle. He was taken to the hospital in serious condition with head injuries, bruises, and lacerations. His trainer, Ricky Marquez, seriously feared that his talented charge would go off the rails at the height of his career. But Felix, contrary to the disappointing prognosis, made a rapid recovery and soon returned to the ring. In September 2019, the boxer published in his profile in the social network a picture with Elise, who was in a large term of pregnancy. In the comment to the photo, he wrote, "Soon I will meet my daddy's princess." And a month later, he announced the birth of a daughter who was given the name Miranda Verdejo Santiago. The young man in public looked like a loving husband, caring father, and an exemplary family man. But secretly from his wife, he continued to meet with Kayla, who could not let go. As Eliza later admitted, she guessed that her husband was cheating on her, but every time he tearfully vowed to leave his mistress. Kayla repeatedly tried to break off this painful relationship, but Felix would not let her go. She had no other men because the boxer threatened that if he found out about the fact that Kayla had someone not good for her and her chosen one, Kayla herself, who had fallen in love with Verdejo since high school, continued to love him despite everything. Rodriguez, as planned, connected her life with the care of animals and got a job at the Center of Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics. Colleagues described her as conscientious, hardworking, and very responsible. She lived with 2 dogs and a cat, which she simply adored. In 2020, Eliza discovered the correspondence of her husband with several mistresses, including Kayla. The wife gave her husband a scandal and threw him out of the house, threatening that she would file for divorce and forbid him to see his daughter. Eliza's threats had an effect. In addition, in the career of the athlete at that time, there was a serious decline, and unnecessary problems where he did not need. For a while, he really stopped seeing Rodriguez. But Felix still did not let her go, trying to control almost every step. Keishla, after a few months of secret visits resumed, and in April 2021, Keishla discovered that she was pregnant. She bought a rapid test at the drugstore, which only confirmed her fears. She first called her sister, who was aware of her complicated relationship with the athlete, and told her everything. It was out of the question to have an abortion because Keishla was already 27 years old, and she was ready to have a child, even if she had to raise it on her own. A few days later, Keishla broke the news to the father of her child, hoping in her heart that he would accept it. But Felix was not happy, to put it mildly. He got angry and told his mistress that she should go to the doctor, and if the pregnancy is confirmed, it will be necessary to have an abortion. Naturally, Rodriguez answered him with a firm refusal. But the boxer began to threaten her and insist. Felix said that an illegitimate child will finally destroy his reputation, and this he cannot allow. After Keishla's visit to the hospital, her pregnancy was confirmed, and she now had a certificate to prove it. She called Felix and told him everything, which made him furious. Felix shouted and demanded that Keishla immediately get rid of the child. But she again responded with a categorical refusal. Then the athlete decided to go on the sly, saying that he did not believe her and wanted to personally look at the issued medical certificate. He appointed Keishla a meeting in the evening in a crowded place, which did not surprise her because they always tried not to draw attention to themselves and do not get in front of anyone. A few days before the meeting, the boxer stopped by his old friend, Luis Antonio Cadiz, who worked in a local machine shop and also had ties with the criminal world, selling illegal drugs. Felix briefly outlined the situation and asked him to help him get rid of his pregnant mistress. Luis had previously been in the field of vision of the police, and the prospect of being in prison scared him. But the athlete was persistent, assured that everything would go smoothly, and the police will never come out on them. Besides, Felix promised him an impressive cash reward. With the support of an accomplice, Felix called Keishla and told her that he wanted to meet her on the evening of April 29th to confirm her pregnancy and decide what to do next. Immediately after talking to her lover, Keishla called her sister back and told her everything. She still had hope that Felix would accept her child and would not insist on an abortion. But Bareilles all this situation is quite alarmed. She knew that the boyfriend had threatened her sister, and she was worried that he wouldn't do anything to her. Bareilles called her mother and shared her concerns, but even together, they could not dissuade Keishla from that fateful meeting. At the appointed time, Rodriguez, taking a doctor's note, arrived at the meeting in her own Kia Forte automobile. Verdejo drove there in his pickup truck, in the back of which Luis was hiding. Keishla immediately got into the athlete's car and showed him the results of the tests. He once again talked about terminating the pregnancy, but Keishla, crying, again responded with a refusal. Against this background, the couple began to quarrel violently, turning to shouting. Then Felix suddenly hit Keishla in the head with his fist, from which she immediately lost consciousness. Until Keishla regained consciousness, Felix took a syringe with a large dose of illegal substances hidden in the glove compartment of the car, which Luis had obtained at his request, and injected Keishla. Then, together with his accomplice, they carried her to the back of the car, where there were already prepared pieces of wire and a concrete block. The men tied Rodriguez up, attached the load, and then covered her with a tarp so that no one would accidentally see anything. Felix then returned to the pickup truck, while his accomplice got behind the wheel of Keishla's vehicle. Together, they drove to the bridge over the San Jose Lagoon. It was virtually deserted at night, and the men, making sure no one could see them, threw Keishla, still alive, into the water. Afterward, however, they decided to fire a few test shots in pursuit, using the firearms they had brought with them, so as not to leave the victim any chance. Having finished the massacre, each of the perpetrators went home. Keishla's co-workers were the first to worry when she didn't show up at the Veterinary Medicine and Aesthetics Center the next day. Keishla has always been very responsible and couldn't just not show up for work without notifying anyone. Since she didn't answer the phone, it was decided to contact her sister to find out what happened. After several unsuccessful attempts to contact her sister, she went to her house. No one answered the door, but Barales had a spare key, so she got in without difficulty. However, she was met only by hungry animals who had not eaten anything for almost 24 hours. Now Barales was already in a panic because she realized that something terrible or irreparable had happened to Kishla. She immediately called her mother and told her everything, and then reported to the police about her suspicions and threats to her sister. She also called Felix, but he claimed that he had spent the previous evening and night at home with his family and had not gone to any meeting. The missing girl's mother took the first flight from Florida to San Juan. She thought that her lover might have taken her daughter to a private clinic and paid for her to have an abortion without her consent. Kayla didn't even want to think about the fact that Kishla was no longer alive. The first thing to do was to question the missing girl's neighbors and co-workers. But they didn't notice anything suspicious and couldn't provide the investigation with any useful information. In parallel messages about the disappearance of Rodriguez were posted on popular social networks with requests to respond to those who know anything about her fate or current whereabouts. The case quickly received wide publicity, and when it became known that the missing girl was in a long-term relationship with a famous athlete and was expecting a child from him, reporters literally lined up to interview any of Rodriguez's family members. The relatives did not hold anything back and spoke out about their suspicions, among other things, blaming Felix for the incident. On April 30th, Kishla's car was found abandoned on the east side of the city, with her documents and personal belongings inside. No signs of struggle were found in the interior, giving a faint hope of finding its owner alive. On May 1st, a passerby strolling on the bridge over the lagoon, Shapar resembles a human body in the shallow water. He reported his discovery to the police, who soon recovered from the water the body of a young woman, presumably the same one the whole city had been looking for several days. Members of the Rodriguez family, who arrived to identify the body, hoped to the last that it was not Kishla, but their hopes were not realized. The body had been in the water for several days and changed a lot, but the girl was immediately identified by a remarkable tattoo on her arm. When news of the gruesome discovery hit the press, the residents of the city revolted and began to go out to spontaneous rallies, demanding punishment for those responsible. The same day, Verdejo was detained and taken to the police station for questioning, but the athlete categorically denied his involvement and claimed that on the night of Kishla's disappearance, he was at home with his family as there was nothing to charge him. Felix was released on his own recognizance. One of the key witnesses was the athlete's legal wife, who at the first interrogation admitted that she was aware of his affair with Kishla, but that she had heard about her rival's pregnancy for the first time. On top of that, she did not confirm her husband's alibi, saying that he was not at home on the night of the murder. The first thing investigators did was check traffic surveillance footage on the way to the bridge from which Kishla was thrown. That's how they found Felix's pickup truck and the victim's car traveling behind each other. But the Kia Forte was clearly not driven by its owner. On the same day, the boxer's car was seized for examination, and in its body, they found some hair of the deceased. Luis was the first to surrender to the police, promising to tell the whole truth in exchange for a reduced sentence. Felix was also taken into custody, but he refused to cooperate with the investigation, did not answer questions, and continued to deny his guilt, despite the presence of irrefutable evidence. A firearm was seized from Felix, which he used to shoot the victim from the bridge and for which he had an official permit. Also, a cell phone check confirmed the fact that Felix, Luis, and Kishla were in the same location on that fateful night. Kishla's final farewell was on May 8th, and the funeral ceremony was all over the national news. It was a kind of action, calling for the perpetrators of the tragedy to be punished to the full extent of the law, as well as an action to draw public attention to the problem of gender violence. The coffin with Rodriguez's body was brought to the cemetery, not in a traditional hearse, but in a white carriage over which white flower petals were thrown from the air. Many famous Puerto Rican natives, including show business stars, athletes, politicians, and public figures have spoken out about the high-profile incident. Verdejo was charged with carjacking, kidnapping, premeditated murder, and the murder of an unborn child. All of these crimes together carried the death penalty, but the relatives of the deceased from the very beginning asked the court to elect a sentence of life imprisonment for the killer so that he would suffer in captivity for the rest of his life. The hearing was repeatedly postponed due to the worldwide coronavirus pandemic, but in the spring of 2021, the trial was held in virtual mode. The court found that the crime was committed by a group of persons by prior conspiracy and with particular cruelty against a pregnant woman. It was possible to reconstruct the chain of events of that night and the details of the crime, mainly thanks to the testimony of Luis, who did not deny his guilt. He admitted that it was he who, at the request of a friend, got the drug for injection and also brought a wire and a concrete block to get rid of the body. But Felix continued to insist on his non-involvement in the case, although his words could not seriously affect the situation. By the way, the wife of the boxer, who acted in court as a witness almost immediately after the arrest of her husband, filed for divorce and tried to abstract from what was happening, focusing on the development of his business and raising a young daughter. According to some reports, not so long ago, Elisa Santiago remarried. Elisa herself admitted in an interview that she repeatedly received anonymous calls and messages with death threats, as well as death wishes to her and even Miranda. Many considered it was the spouse of the athlete as the organizer of the crime, but no evidence was found. In the summer of 2023, it became known that the jury, having familiarized itself with all the evidence and heard the testimony of all the witnesses, was finally ready to announce the final verdict. Felix Verdejo and his accomplice, Luis Cadiz, were found guilty on each of the charges against them. But despite this, the killers have not yet been sentenced. The next court hearing is scheduled for mid-November 2023. Most likely, both men involved in the deaths of Keishla Rodriguez and her unborn child will likely go to prison for life, with no right to ever leave prison. Thank you for watching the entire video. Hello, and see you again in the new video.